her style. "Mr. Norris, you have 2 visitors out here who say they need to talk to you," Layla, the front desk agent at Commercial Credit Union in Houston, remarked to one of the associate vice presidents. Andrew Norris looked down at his appointment book from the computer screen he was reading. Though he felt it was prudent to confirm, he was very certain he didn't have an appointment set for Monday at 9:30 a.m. It was Friday afternoon at 5 last week. He hadn't looked at the book since right before he went for the weekend. Reassured that he hadn't overlooked a meeting, Norris, 36, instructed the receptionist to bring the guests in. The blonde, blue-eyed AVP stood up from his desk to his full 6-foot height as they approached his doorway, his hand outstretched around his desk. A youthful, blonde woman who appeared to be in her early 22nd and a tall, attractive older man with mixed blonde and gray hair entered his office. This was a couple he had never seen before. Norris observed that they appeared to be grandfather and granddaughter, and he questioned why precisely they had requested him. Norris shook hands with each of them, made an official introduction, and invited them to have a seat in the seats opposite from his chair before the older man began to speak. "You might want to close the door. What we have to discuss is personal, not business," remarked the elderly gentleman. At that announcement, Norris arched both eyebrows, followed the advice, and went back to his seat. He peered intently into the elder man's beautiful blue eyes. "We're sorry for taking time away from your job, but this seemed to be the best time to do this," remarked the elderly gentleman. "I don't know how much you know about me, or us. My name is Magnus Anderson, and this is my daughter, Genevieve. I'm your biological father, and Jen is your sister, or, at least, your half-sister." With his mouth hanging open and no words coming out, Norris froze in his chair. "I'm guessing then that your parents, or maybe just your mother, never told you about me," remarked the older gentleman. With his mouth agape and unable to form words, Norris performed his finest act of being a fish out of water. "Your father didn't know anything when he raised you, and he either still doesn't know crap or agreed to raise you as his own. But I can tell you that what I'm telling you, son, is the whole truth. Your mother and I had an affair for almost a year 37 years ago, and you are the result. Taking a DNA test on Ancestry.com might be the simplest way for you to confirm what I'm stating. My tree and the results of the ancestry test I took are both stored in the system. At this point, I'm thinking your mother wouldn't be honest with you regarding the man you consider to be your father. You old dirt, don't you dare disrespect my father." The other man and the young woman recoiled in their seats as Norris screamed at them. "I know this must be hard, some stranger walking into your office and claiming to be your real father, but it's the truth," the elderly gentleman stated calmly. "I'm sorry to lay this on you after all this time." "Why are you doing this if you're so sorry?" Norris questioned sharply. "I had thought you would have tried to find me sooner and that your parents, or at least your mother, would have told you sooner. But after 20 years, I gave up on that hope. But now my time is limited, and I could no longer wait for you to come to me. I have the beginnings of dementia, and I am trying to put my house in order before my life as I know it goes away." Drew Norris seemed to see ghosts as he observed the two. He saw that both of the guests shared his coloring. Drew always assumed as a child that he was just more of a Nordic mother than a Southern European father. Not only did he share his mother's fundamental appearance and coloring, but he also recognized himself in the two people seated across from him. With more than a hint of pride, Anderson declared, "I am Finnish on the one hand and Norwegian on the other. My roots are in the Vikings. I have 4 children, 3 with Jen's mother and you. You are the oldest and Jen is the youngest. The tentative 'do you mind if I ask how old you are?' 'You look almost too old for my mother,' was all that Norris said. I'm 74, about 10 years older than your mother if I remember correctly. She was a young secretary in the history department at Harvard. I was a tenured professor. With the exception of the father portion, everything the older man had spoken thus far fit what Norris knew about his family. During the initial years of their marriage, his parents had resided in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it was in fact there that he and his elder sister, Lucy, were born. His father was a mechanical engineer who worked in the city, while his mother was employed by the university. Your mother was always concerned that your father would be upset with her for the small amount of weight she had gained carrying the baby, only about 20 pounds, and I remember thinking that your father was a putz if he couldn't see that your mother was a beautiful woman. She brought up this subject at lunch one day in the cafeteria at a table right next to where I was sitting. I started making it a point to pay her a praise when I stopped by the history department office. I was aware of my ultimate goal. I was a ladies' man all my life. I knew what to do after I had them in bed, and I knew what to say to eventually get them in bed. Yes, I was already married, but this was more than just bonding in my opinion. However, I was aware that your mother thought it might be more than that. We had even talked about her leaving your father for me, but I was unable to leave my wife once she became pregnant with our first child. Luckily, your mother didn't tell your father anything, so she could carry on as if nothing had happened. She never told me if she was going to tell your father. I didn't ask because I didn't want to intrude. That was between them. It was their marriage. It was considerate of you to avoid interfering, Norris remarked with a hint of sarcasm. From what Kate said, she truly loved your father. It was just that she was feeling a little dumpy, and I was there to bolster her confidence when she was feeling low. We started our affair about a year after your sister was born, and 2 months later she was pregnant." When the older man had concluded his narrative, Norris let out a breath without realizing he was holding it. After Norris was born, his parents relocated to Indiana around a year later. Janet, his younger sister, was born 2 years later. "Even though I wasn't invited to be a part of your life, I kept track of where you were all these years," stated the elderly gentleman. Both Norris and his younger sister shared their mother's fair complexion and showed her preference. Norris allowed himself to entertain the concept that the two kids might end up following in their mother's side of the family. For 10, 20, and 30 seconds, Norris sat in silence. Finally, Norris said, "Bottom line, what do you want from me, Mr. Anderson?" "Just your acknowledgement that I actually exist, as your father, at least biologically. Apparently, your parents or your mother never wanted you to know about me, and that was their choice, but I've always known you existed, and that you are a part of me." The older man got up, Genevieve trailing behind, tears in his eyes. Uncertain about what was going on, Norris got to his feet as well. He held out his hand for a handshake, thinking the encounter was ended, but Anderson took it and dragged the younger man into a 10-second hug. Anderson answered, "That's all I wanted, son. I appreciate your time." He then exited the office with Genevieve. For several extended minutes, Drew sat by himself in his office, his thoughts racing like a high-speed blender. To confirm what Anderson had claimed, he would undoubtedly need to take an ancestry DNA test. If, on the other hand, what Anderson had informed him was true, then he was in for an epic problem. Drew had only known one father, Alex Norris, until a few minutes ago. He looked up to his father, and as Drew matured into a man, Alex became not just a fantastic parent but also a fantastic friend. He asked himself, "Now what do I do?" Drew was familiar with the queries. All he knew was that the first and most important question was, did his father know that Drew was another man's biological son? Drew informing Alex if he didn't know would break his heart, and he wanted to avoid that at all means. But wouldn't it be the betrayal of betrayals to pretend Alex didn't know and then discovered that Drew knew but chose not to inform him? He thought about telling his mother about his encounter with Anderson first, but then he reasoned that if his father wasn't aware, his mother had been lying to him for a long time and most likely still would. If both parents were aware of this and chose not to inform Drew, that would probably be the only way for things to turn out nicely for him. That wouldn't be the epic confrontation, but it would cause some sore emotions. There was a definite thud as Drew dropped his head to his desk. He declared out to no one, "I detest Mondays." Drew placed an order for a DNA test on Ancestry.com. He was aware that it would take a few weeks for him to receive the results. By then, perhaps he could find a means to travel to a different universe. When Norris received the results of the Ancestry DNA testing a few weeks later, it was clear that Magnus had told Drew the whole truth. Drew had made up his mind by now not to tell his folks what he had discovered. Though he was aware that it was a cowardly move, he had the utmost affection for Alex and would stop at nothing to protect the man he still looked up to. When Alex Norris's Ancestry.com DNA kit arrived in the mail, he was overjoyed. His curiosity about his ancestry was piqued, but he had no surviving older relatives to consult. About a year ago, he signed up for the genealogical website and began the process of carefully compiling his family tree. Kate, Alex's 41-year-old wife, treated her husband as though he were a young child holding a brand new toy. For a year, she had listened, if not actively, to her husband's endless babble about discovering various family members. She was aware that he was spending years searching at former family members. Recognizing Kate's puzzled expression, Alex grinned back at his spouse. Alex reasoned that since she had family Bibles dating back over 3 centuries on both sides of her family, she wouldn't comprehend. Alex needed just 5 minutes to gather his swab and prepare it for mailing. Snatching up his car keys, he announced to his spouse that he was heading to the post office. She called back, saying, "All right, Alex, drive carefully." When they returned, Alex began interacting with the new family members he had discovered and discovered numerous more relatives through the DNA matches. He was using the Ancestry website for at least 1 hour every day. Alex exclaimed to his kid over the phone, "I've paid for your membership for the next year and I've got a DNA test coming down for you, Lucy and Janet. This stuff is great. The info is tremendous. You 3 have to try this." Drew said, "Wow, Dad, that's great," as his brain began to race. Particularly close to his son was Alex. Every week at the very least, the two spoke. They were in agreement about almost everything, including sports and politics. Drew shared Alex's quiet demeanor, dramatic moments, and dry sense of humor. He adored his 5-year wife with the same regard that Alex showed Kate, and everyone in the family could see it. After 2 months, Drew still hadn't submitted his DNA test results, and despite his eagerness, Alex was baffled as to why. "You'll love this, bud," he continued, addressing Drew by his well-known alias. "You'll get to email with family we didn't know we had until recently," and Drew said nothing more than a whisper, Dad, I don't need to do my DNA. I already did and you won't find me. I'm not your son. At least not biologically." Alex exclaimed, "Wait, what? What do you mean you're not my son?" "Of course you're my son." "No, Dad, I'm not. I had a visitor last year. Does the name Magnus Anderson mean anything to you? Alex was, to put it mildly, perplexed. Drew sensed that you were hesitant to respond. Dad, are you someplace where you can talk? I mean, you need to be in a room by yourself. Kate was in the family room, and Alex was chatting in the kitchen. Alex ambled out to the front porch and swung on the porch swing. He said to his son, "Okay, we can talk now," in the most serious tone Drew had heard since Alex, when he was 12, had given him the talk about bonding. Drew described in great detail to Alex what happened at his encounter with Magnus and Genevieve Anderson the year before. "I'm sorry, Dad. I was hoping to never have to tell you. I wasn't sure if you knew already and just decided to raise me as yours, or what the story was." "Hold you high as mine?" Alex essentially cried out. "You are mine, Bud. I don't care what any DNA test says. Now as for whatever your mother has told you. She hasn't told me anything, and I haven't told her a thing. Dad, I'm sorry for not telling you. You know I would never do anything to hurt you." "I know, Drew. I know. Not your fault, sonny boy, and it shouldn't have been your problem," Alex replied. Drew said, "So now what are you going to do? After drinking a bottle of Jack?" "I have no idea," Alex replied. "I always thought your mom and I were in it for the long haul, that we'd grow old together. Maybe we still can, but right now my heart is breaking. Right now we might not have another 10 minutes. I'll call you in a few days, Drew. I love you, Dad. Bye." Alex returned inside the house, entered the bathroom, and immediately started to throw up. He cleared the area and went to his liquor cabinet, where he took out a glass and a 3/4 full bottle of Jack Daniels. With a limp, he stumbled to the kitchen table and sat down. As he sipped his third drink, Alex wondered, are any of them really mine? "Are you okay, baby? Why are you in there?" Kate yelled as she entered the kitchen. "Good question. Am I okay?" Alex asked himself. "No, I'm not okay. What do you think?" Much of what I thought I knew was wrong. There was a serious thought in Alex's mind to go into the family room and tell her so. Alex put his left hand to his chest and pounded. He wondered whether he was having a heart attack because he was still feeling sick to his stomach. Could it really be that Kate, his Kate, had cheated on him years before? A few hours prior, it didn't appear feasible. After what his kid had stated, he realized that it was not just conceivable but also an undeniable truth. When Kate was 23 years old and a junior at a big Midwestern university, she was standing in line by herself for her Sunday night dinner at a McDonald's 43 years ago. Alex was just behind her, waiting and observing how nicely the girl in front of him fit into her tight trousers. Her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders and her pink sweater luring him in from behind made him wonder what the front looked like. When she accepted her little bag of food from the McDonald's employee and turned to leave him, he knew he had his answer. Her face was attractive, and her sweater fit her well. She saw him staring and smiled shyly at him. He grinned back, realizing he had been caught. Knowing that the young man would have to wait a little while for his food, Kate took her time returning to her dorm. After giving him a few minutes, she turned to slowly head back. Only a few hundred yards down the road, Alex saw Kate and knew she had been waiting for him. Soon after, he hurried over and caught up with her, asking if she would mind a companion on the way to the dorm. She accepted, and after roughly 2 months, Kate and Alex were dating. They got married a year after they graduated, he with a degree in engineering, she in teaching. Kate started working in the history department at Harvard, while Alex started working for a Cambridge engineering company. For a young couple, they fared well, and 2 years later Lucy, their first child, was born. They relocated to Indianapolis, a month after the birth of their second child, Andrew, and Alex accepted a position in middle management at another engineering company. Though he had reason to look back, Alex found that things weren't as perfect as they appeared to be. He had pleasant memories of those early years. Kate didn't appear to mind that Alex was putting in a lot of hours back then. In fact, she had a couple long days herself. "Shit," he exclaimed. "Why the hell would a history department admin ever have to work late? I am an idiot." When Kate arrived home from work the following afternoon to find Alex's car already in the garage, she was taken aback. She noticed that he had seemed a touch strange the previous evening. Perhaps he had taken sick leave and left work early. She cried out, "Hon, are you okay?" as she entered the kitchen of the house from the garage. She was astonished when he softly responded, "No, I'm not," from his position at the table. Kate stepped back and noticed that Alex had already poured 2 cups of coffee. Alex had set her cup down at her normal area at the table as she took a seat. Kate tried to figure out what was wrong while Alex sat impassively and started straight ahead. Hissed Alex, "Are any of the children mine, Kate?" Kate's eyes widened as her cheeks turned scarlet. This was the last thing she expected to be talking about now, after all these years. She muttered, "Crap," beneath her breath. Expecting her spouse to still be looking straight ahead, she glanced to her left. Rather, he was staring right at her, glaring through her, to be precise. Kate looked down at the table right away. "Any? None?" he questioned angrily. "2. The girls are yours," croaked Kate. Alex exclaimed, "So says my cheating wife." "Well, I guess that's why they invented DNA testing." "Alex, there's no need for insults," Kate reprimanded. "It's like libel, Kate. It's not name-calling if it's the truth, which it is." "How? Why? After all these years, how did you find out, Al?" our son. And yes, he's still my son. Got a visit last year from your lover, who wanted to get a look at the son he had never seen before he completely succumbs to dementia. With a gasp, Kate covered her mouth with her palm. She questioned, "You mean you've known for a year?" With astonishment. "No, Drew has known for a year. He kept your lousy secret for a year. He only told me because I kept pushing for that damn DNA test. If I hadn't pushed, I never would have known, and you could have pretended for the rest of our lives that you loved me. I do love you, Alex. I do. I made a mistake. I had a lapse of judgment." Kate broke down. "Let's talk about this, please." A lapse of judgment. Is that what you call an affair that went on for almost a year? A lapse of judgment. That's when Kate started crying. With a dissatisfied expression, Alex stood up and entered the family room. Alex slept in the guest room later that night for the second night in a row. The following day, during his lunch break, Alex gave a call to a lawyer who had been referred to him by a coworker who had recently separated. Alex understood there would be a 50-over-50 split because Indiana was a no-fault state, but because of the salary gap, he would likely have to pay some alimony for a while. That evening, Kate was in the kitchen making dinner for Alex. Alex felt the smell in the house was fantastic. Alex told himself he would miss her cooking. Another silent dinner followed until Kate finally spoke up. "Can we talk, Alex, please?" Alex chewed the last of the food in his mouth, sipped more wine, then gestured to his wife. "I only have one question, Kate." "Why?" At the question, Kate winced. Though she was aware it was coming, she was certain Alex wouldn't appreciate the response. She thought of giving him a disinfected version, but she didn't know how much of it he already knew from Drew. At this point, the worst thing she could do was probably be discovered to be lying. "I was a little bummed out about the extra 20 pounds I still carried after Lucy was born, but I guess Magnus noticed that and began to compliment me and make me feel better about myself. He was a little older than me, and he just had a way of making me feel good just by talking to me. We went out for lunches and then dinners, and eventually, well, the friendship turned into affair. I knew I shouldn't, especially since I really did love you, but then the bonding was so good once we started. It wasn't better than what we had, it was different, and since I knew it was wrong, it was very exciting. Then, I became pregnant, and since I couldn't tell whose child it was, I knew we had to break up, and we did. Probably the easiest thing to do would have been to not have it." Stoically taking in the news, Alex sometimes sipped on his coffee. Kate delivered exactly the sanitized version he was expecting, no less. "Don't you think that after all this time, you owe me the whole truth, not just a cleaned-up version that ignores half the story?" Alex asked. Kate's face was scrunched up. She had no idea Alex would seek additional specifics. Shouting, "Crap," she said. "He was a beautiful, strong man, 6 feet, with muscles, and he had a nice manner about him. I guess I felt kind of hard for him. Then when I got pregnant, I figured it was probably his, but since his physical characteristics were like my family's, I knew you would never suspect the baby wasn't yours. And, honestly, he was such a beautiful man I really wanted to have his baby." Kate said that final sentence before she could stop herself. She snapped out of it and shot a sidelong glance at her husband, figuring he was too agitated over the whole thing to truly understand what she'd said. Despite his best efforts, Alex couldn't help but cringe at Kate's final comment. "So when did you find out Drew was your lover's child?" replied Alex. "Magnus and I shared a bed every night during the week that the majority of the history department traveled to UCLA for a conference. You recall that? My gynecologist worked on that and narrowed down the dates. Although I knew you would never find out where I was in my cycle, I was ovulating at the time. I knew you would never add 2 and 2 together, and you never kept track. Thus, I was a dupe and a schmuck." "Perfect," said Alex. "Yet you failed to include the part where your lover chose to stay with her rather than leave you and became pregnant with her own wife as well." "I turned into a handy backup plan," Alex said. Kate remarked, "I still loved you, Alex. You weren't a backup plan. I loved you so deeply that 3 years later we had Janice. Furthermore, you were a fantastic father to our kids. We raised those kids pretty damn well, and now we get to spend our golden years together. We're so close, Alex. We're 64 years old. Don't screw this up now. Things have been good. Don't ruin everything for a mistake I made more than 30 years ago. Please use your head and your heart." Alex cried. "God damn it, Kate. You mess up and now you're trying to blame me. You've been lying to me for 38 years. "No, Alex, I haven't been lying to you for 38 years. I did love you then. I love you now. I've never stopped loving you. I know you may not believe it, but it's possible to love more than one person at a time. But for a while there, I was number 2. We made vows to forsake all others, Kate," Alex said. "Had I known then what I know now, we would have been history. You broke my heart. You broke my trust." Tears filled Kate's eyes as she looked up. Magnus seemed to tell Drew everything, and it seemed that Drew told Alex everything, too. She wondered, for the first time, how Drew was handling things. She was curious to know how Drew and Alex were getting along. She also pondered. Alex said, "I know you're wondering. Apparently Loverboy has dementia, and before he lost everything, he wanted to see his firstborn and introduce himself. Seems you two never had a definitive discussion of what you were going to tell Drew about his real father." He even wondered if you had told me and the two of us had decided to raise Drew as ours. Dementia. Poor guy, Kate softly and quietly remarked. Even I wouldn't wish that on the poor guy, Alex replied. Well, I'd feel better if he took a slap. Kate pursed her lips, but decided it would be wiser to stay silent, realizing that she was not going to win this argument and that the best she could hope for at this point was a virtual tie. Now that I think about it, I should have asked why a history department secretary had to work late sometimes, but I just had total faith in you. Alex apologized for making things so simple for you. Finished. Have faith within you. Obviously, I was a moron. Every time Alex dropped the F-bomb, Kate winced. He tried not to swear at his wife up until now, certainly not at the big one. The following day, Alex gave his son a call and informed him of the events of the previous evening, mentioning that Kate had attempted to withhold some information from him. Even over the phone, Drew could see his father was having difficulty remaining composed. Have you come to a decision yet, Dad? Remember, you two have a lot of years together, and it would be a shame to see you two split at this point, Drew replied. She would have left me, so I haven't made up my mind, but I have to admit that it will be difficult for me to forgive the betrayal of my trust and the years of silence. How are you doing, though? Alex questioned. Really, I know it had to be difficult to tell me. I apologize for placing you in this predicament. Dad, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I would rather not have to perform such tasks ever again. Are we good, Dad? I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, Dad. Honestly, we're fine, bud. This wasn't even supposed to be your concern. You do realize that you will always be my son, regardless of what a piece of paper says. Yes, Dad, and you'll be my father forever. Having said that, have you paid your other family a visit yet? What are you missing? 2 more sisters, at least half of them. A brother. I have not yet made a visit. I had 2 sisters until last year, so maybe I should, Drew added. I now have a half-brother, 4 half-sisters, and a chaotic life. Later that day, Drew received a second call, this one from his mother. Mom, you are aware that I work here, right? With more than a hint of overt contempt in his tone, Drew uttered those words. Kate said quietly, You know Dad and I both love you very much. I'm sorry, Drew, for everything. Mom, how could you? You cheated on Dad, became pregnant, and remained silent about it to Dad and me until you were trapped some 30 years later. Oh no, it's chilly there. Drew, I sincerely apologize. I cherished him. I had assumed that we would be dating when his wife also became pregnant. However, you're dead. Without a doubt, Alex was the greatest father you could have had. Both you and I are aware of that. Yes, Mom, it is true. I hope you are aware of that. A week later, Kate received divorce papers served at her place of employment. Alex was notified immediately by his attorney, and his phone blew up. He didn't answer calls or texts, and in fact, accomplished a lot at work. He picked up a 6-pack of beer and some pizza knowing what was coming home. The verbal assault started as he had gone 2 steps into the house. You self-centered person, are you kidding me? You just had to serve me at my office to humiliate me, didn't you? Yelled Kate. To be honest, I found the idea appealing, Alex said. Why can't you receive the same amount of abuse as myself? You are aware that that is from ancient history. That was 38 years in the past. You were unaware of it, as I never withheld anything from you. I'm not going to apologize for something that happened so long ago at this time. I understand that you are finding it difficult to move on from it, but it's time to grow up and go on. I apologize, sweetie. I was unaware that there was a time restriction on shattering my heart, Alex remarked. You had a deep affection for him. Until his wife became pregnant and he stayed for her, you were going to leave me for him. He passed over you for her. I didn't overlook that. After Kate and her lawyer disputed the divorce, the judge ordered therapy, and Alex knew it would not be easy when the counselor brought up his old wounds after all these years. Mister, you seem unusually hurt, Norris, even though this affair happened nearly 40 years ago, the therapist said to Alex during their initial meeting. This is Ryan, not to me. It's only been a few months since I found out about the affair. The wound is still fresh, and it's new to me, Alex answered. Kate said, We had a great life together since then. What happened almost 40 years ago seemed like a lifetime ago. My devotion to my spouse is something that cannot be disregarded. However, she was in infidelity for about a year. Don't cheat. That's the reason she had to make a new commitment to me, Alex stated. Recommitment is not necessary. She got pregnant by her lover, and if he hadn't decided to stay with his wife, she would have left me, had his kid with him. So because he decides to stay with his wife, she comes back to me, keeping everything secret. I was her backup plan, for God's sakes. At this time, Alex was virtually screaming. He had a crimson face. The counselor could feel his wrath, as could everyone in a quarter-mile radius. Callister Ryan responded, Mr. Norris, please calm down. Volume down, sir. Alex let out a scream. In the upcoming session, Kate requested to talk first with the counselor. She was so in need of Alex realizing how much she loved him. Alex, I apologize for breaking our vows, but I always loved you. And when I recommitted to you, I did so completely, and never once looked at another man. I came to realize my mistake, regretted it, and gave you every ounce of my love after that. That's why we had Janice. She was my gift to you, to our marriage. Alex met Kate's beseeching gaze directly. He told himself that he would have passed away believing he had an almost flawless marriage if he hadn't found out about Kate's infidelity. He would have gotten up from his chair, gone to her, and offered her a consoling hug at a different place and time. The persistent notion that he had discovered her infidelity, her pregnancy with another man's kid, and her declaration that she would have left him had Magnus not chosen to remain with his pregnant wife, however, stopped him. Any one of those three ought to give him a solid excuse to split from Kate. When all three were taken into consideration, it seemed obvious. Aside from his 43 years of unwavering affection for her, Kate had seen the fear in Alex's face. His gaze kept flickering to hers. Whispering, "You would have left me for him," Alex said. "We wouldn't have enjoyed the last 38 years of what I considered to be a great marriage because you would have been gone and I would have been alone. He had become your number one love, and you would have dumped me if it weren't for the circumstances. Yeah, that's love. But for whatever reason, I stayed, and I kind of rediscovered you. You recently acknowledged that you believed the marriage to be wonderful. What was what I believed to be true?" Alex exclaimed. "That was a farce. I was duped by you. I was disrespected by you. If your marriage is founded on deception, you can't call it a great one. A falsehood by omission. Your lapse of judgment, as you called it, would have resulted in a divorce if I had known about it. How dare you? We took vows. Didn't they mean anything to you?" That was when Alex broke down, crying for the first time over anything other than the death of his parents, Kate had witnessed. She was beginning to realize that Alex was just as shocked as if this had happened yesterday. It seems that the counselor had interpreted the circumstances similarly. "Mrs. Norris, although you would obviously like this situation to be resolved quickly, your husband has a lot to digest, and it's all fairly new to him. And at this point in your lives, it looks like this reconciliation could be a slow go. It might seem to be better than the alternative, but going into your retirement years with this between you, that's going to take both of you working very hard to overcome. If one of you is not committed." Kate gave Alex a stern look. She turned her head to see Alex, but he shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know, Kate, honestly. I can't answer that," Alex replied. "I know the question to ask is would I be better off with or without you? But I keep getting two answers. After all this time, I know I would be better off with you, just for the convenience alone. But it's not about convenience, is it? Can I live with you, knowing that your choice was another? Knowing that you lied to me for 38 years? Knowing that everything I thought was true for the last 38 years was an illusion?" Kate urged Alex to stay married, so she asked the three children to call him. Although Drew made it clear to his mother that he would not meddle in his father's choice, the two girls did not hesitate to call their father to express their support for their mother. Alex respectfully informed both girls that while he would seriously examine their request, he was unable to commit to a conclusion. After Lucy made her plea, she begged, "Please, Dad, don't break up the family for a 40-year-old mistake. Let it go." Alex said, "Luke, may I ask you a question? If Robbie were to cheat on you, would you forgive him easily? After I smack him?" "Yeah, probably," his eldest said. A few days later, as Alex was shaving, the solution was practically in front of his face. To his mirror, Alex said, "Yeah, you're right." At the next counseling segment, Alex requested to go first. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ryan, but I now know that I can't stay with Kate, and we should stop these sessions," Alex replied. The counselor said, "Pardon me, Mr. Norris. What caused this epiphany?" "Well, my reflection actually did," Alex said. "I came to the conclusion that there was no way I could ever look at myself in a mirror again if I let Kate spit on me and just took it." Kate complained, "It was never like that. I didn't spit on you. I love you. You were going to leave me, leave us. If that's not spitting on me, I don't know what is. You didn't leave only because his wife got pregnant and he decided to stay with her. So the decision to stay with me really wasn't yours. It was his." Kate lowered her gaze to the ground. Her eyes darted to Alex, then back to the counselor, and then down again. "Mrs. Norris," inquired the counselor. "It may sound severe, but I suppose it's accurate," Kate muttered almost silently. "But what about all those great years? Don't they count for anything, Mr. Norris? She got a do-over, but I got lied to. And we won't even talk about Drew, will we?" Kate said again, "Alex, you're making a terrible mistake. I love you and you love me. When it comes to this marriage, obviously it won't be my first mistake," Alex stated. Kate wrinkled her face in response to that remark. "I don't want a divorce. I don't want a divorce. I don't want a divorce," Kate yelled. Kate ended up living in a modest unit in a senior housing extension at the age of 64 after not getting what she wanted. She was rapidly approaching the age of bitter old women. When Grandma Norris came to visit, not even her grandkids were overjoyed. Alex ended up in a regular part of town, but nonetheless a modest flat. He made the decision to start over during his retirement years. After retirement, he purchased a Harley-Davidson Road King for himself and drove throughout the spring, summer, and fall to see the sights. He was an accomplished amateur photographer who would sometimes send a picture to a magazine in exchange for a few more bucks. Though Alex had not been alone for over 40 years, the fact that single women outnumber single men in their 60s made dating more enjoyable for him on occasion. It also helped that Alex wasn't planning on finding lovely, attractive women to spend a crazy evening with. Still, when he went on dates, his partners appeared happy with him because he was in quite decent shape for a man his age. Even though Alex relished his sporadic relationships with other women, he acknowledged that he missed his comfort with Kate. After making love with his ex-wife, he would always curl up and snuggle. He missed that. He soon discovered that the majority of his hookups were not romantic. Though he and his sisters would have loved Alex to remain married to his mother, Drew was happy to see that his father was enjoying his do-over. Compared to his sisters, who took the side of their mother, Drew was far more understanding of the choice. Neither daughter wanted to press their father too hard, given that Alex went through with the divorce without hesitation. Grandpa Norris was an icon with his long hair, easygoing demeanor, and stylish motorcycle, but Grandma Norris wasn't very popular among the grandchildren. Drew didn't contact his other half-siblings until after Magnus passed away. He clarified to Alex that he will always view Magnus as an intruder and Alex as his true father. But since his half-siblings from Magnus were innocent of the events, he felt free to get in touch with them, especially after Alex assured him that finding out about the rest of his family would not be difficult. My comment: some say that because of the sheer amount of time together, divorce wasn't the answer. While I do think sometimes reconciliation is possible and should happen, this wasn't one of those times. As soon as Kate said, "I'm not going to apologize for something that happened that long ago. I'm sorry that you are having a tough time getting over it, but it's time to man up and get on with life," that was it for me. No reconciliation, no finding a way to make it work. Divorce her.